the inner reason, especially with the first form, is actually to train your intention. That's in fact the name of the form. And so you reduce external variables, including steps, right? Including different stances. You just are in one stance. And it's kind of like the traditional maybe image that people have of Kung Fu, right? But they usually use like a low horse stance, right? The beginner has to be able to stand, at the Shaolin Temple or Wudang Mountain in a low stance just to be able to test their physicality, let's say, right? They have that kind of physical strength to do so. Maybe it's a testing process. However, I think much more so, if I imagine being in that context, is actually to test the character of the student. Is this person just not going to do it, or do they give up after 2 minutes? Especially if I think about investing my time and energy in not just nowadays it's commercialized, so maybe you need a lot of students, but back in the day you didn't need that many students. You survived more simply, and you were looking for quality, not quantity. And so you would use this very simple form, let's say a stance, maybe even without arm movements, to see, and you just tell them to stand. And maybe that's the first and only technique you teach them for a month. And maybe 10 come to you, and after a week, 5 leave. And at the end of that month, only 2 are left. And you're like, okay, cool. Very low maintenance way to check for the quality, if the value is the character of sort of diligence. And yeah, in some systems, that's the most important, right? And so back to Wing Chun, it is about being able to focus your intention to do one thing at one time. That is the meaning of Siu Nim Tau, Xiao Nian Tou. Nian means a thought. The character Nian has 2 parts. Top part means this or now, and the bottom part means mind. So this mind, meaning this mind, not that mind of the past or future. In this moment, what is your quality of mind? That's super important for actually any context. And even for the more sort of dramatic, acrobatic ones, right? Like you have to be very aware in the moment. Otherwise, you may hurt yourself, right? Fall or not look good on camera. So there are physical risks, right, and aesthetic risks. Now, in the self-defense context, you could die, right, if you lose your focus or attention. If you're not in this moment, if you start thinking about your boyfriend or girlfriend or your pet or the dinner in a self-defense situation, you don't have the nian or the nim, or breaking it down, the top part is jing, this, now, and the bottom part is xing. Jing xing, this mind of now. It's problematic. It's you lose presence, and it could be your absence from this life. And tou, the third character. So nim is the second character. Nian, tou is the third character. It means the start. It literally means the head, right? Which is kind of the start of your body, or as in a trailhead where you start the hike. So this is the idea of keeping it fresh. I mean, it's related to nim. Actually, nim tou is often used together as a thread, let's say, of thinking in your stream of consciousness. Oh, I had a nim tou, right? And so even the idea of this Zen idea or Chan idea of beginner's mind. Don't think, even after 20, 30 years of practice, that you know everything, because that's the death of learning and progress. So the idea of tou is always to start again, restart. And for me, that psychological or philosophical psychology has been very useful. And I saw colleagues and students suffer and get bored and quit when they couldn't have that nim tou idea. They couldn't embody it. Oh, I already learned that. Oh, or some part of their mind's like, I've already done that a million times. I don't, let me learn new things. Let me move on, right? And it's very important, again, in the first form, that you do everything as if it's for the first time. Of course, you have 20 years of experience, so that first time in that moment is with 20 years of experience behind that, with 2 million repetitions of that one technique, let's say. So it's much more high quality. However, the psychology that you want to have is that freshness in the moment, that even joy, like, wow, right? First time, you're shown something that's meaningful to you, like, wow, that inspiration. And that even ties to the name WingChun, right? The idea of Chun as life and birth. That's kind of more the meta level of the name of our system, is to keep it fresh. That's true for any relationship, right? Even with other people, partners or family, like, oh, same old Bob, right? What can you do to keep the relationship fresh, right? You can have the mindset like, wow, I'm just going to look at Bob without all this kind of memory or history for that moment and see it anew, right? And that's, again, very, very practical for self-defense context, right? Meaning minimal assumptions. Minimal assumptions is good. Don't think that you know this person because they're scrawny and shorter than you, that they're, maybe in your old mind, your memory, like, oh, this person is not dangerous, right? But the kind of big buff guy, oh, I better watch out for. It could be opposite. So watch out for your Nim Tau. Watch out for the thoughts that you have, and keep them fresh, and be careful of your filters, and change your filter often. Because the more you make assumptions, especially in a self-defense context, the more risk it is. Yeah. And so the Siu part is about focusing, one thing at a time. Siu means small. So small in quantity means don't do too much at one time, right? At least in this stage. And so some think of Siu Nim Tau as the beginning stage, but it's also the stage of mastery, where you're able to really just do one thing fully at one frame of time. If you try to do two things, then your awareness is split 50%, right? If you try to do four things, then your awareness is split 25%. So it lowers the quality. More quantity, you're able to do four things, but really at the same quality as if you would have done each one of those one by one, right? With 100% awareness and focus. Yeah, it's a question for you, for the viewer to consider. And so to unitask, you see, all these things are very interesting, even, and especially for modern times, where multitasking and fragmentation of our attention in different directions, in more than 4 directions, right? In 10 different ways, right? Because you have your Instagram identity, you have your Facebook identity, right? But also your physical, like you need to go to the bathroom, or you have some pain, right? But you're also a brother or a husband, right? So you have all these identities, and you're never fully in any one. You're kind of pulled in so many different identities and roles and directions. So your energy isn't concentrated. And again, in self-defense, that's dangerous, because if you're doing a strike, why not put your full focus in it? Maybe you only need 1 or 2 strikes to deal with the situation, versus if you're doing that strike while thinking about whatever two other things, right? Then it's not fully embodied, and you may need 10 strikes to get the same result. Let's say, be able to incapacitate the attacker enough that you can escape. Right? So the Siu is about one thing at one time, right? That's why there's some 2-arm movements, but they're usually symmetrical, so you are kind of doing the same thing, right? Just mirror image along this plane, or they're just single arm movements. And the stance is the stance. You're developing that rootedness, that groundedness. That if you try to learn too many stances at one time, it's hard to get the quality. Learn one stance, learn via one stance. In this case, the Jingsen Ma, or the goat clamping stance, as some colleagues call it, Yiji Kim Ma. Via the vehicle of one stance, develop that inner feeling of groundedness, alignment to earth, and rootedness, and then transfer it to other horses, if you will. We call them Ma, right? If you try to ride 4 horses, in the same day, maybe you don't get that inner feeling. Right? because they all have a little bit different characteristic, right? The Yima, the Zaksanma, etc. So simplicity as an antidote to overcomplication and too many variables, it's very important, especially in the beginning. But it's my opinion, actually, the Siu Nim Tau wasn't the first form that was developed historically. I from my experience, believe that it was codified later as an essence of the other forms, and even as a sort of fractal microcosm of the whole system. It contains seeds of the other forms, for instance. So I can say that for Siu Nim Tau, right, is a focusing of unitask, both physically or the mind in the body in such a way that it is fully present in the whole body from top of the head to bottom of the feet. And in terms of movement, you're really driving your full intention and energy into this idea of the toe part, the third word, as this kind of impulse, this initiation to go from 0 to 60. How do you turn on? How do you overcome that hesitation, that procrastination within yourself first, right? We sometimes think of an external trigger like a green light or like a gun going off, ready, set, go. Siu Nim Tau, very importantly, is overcoming those hesitations and procrastination blockages within. Can you set the intention to do a movement and do it and just perform it without any overthinking? Which is actually a very useful psychological state. Most of the time in this day and age, we overthink because we have too much information. And should I go learn guitar or should I go learn swimming, blah blah blah, right? And you don't do any of them. So Siu Nim Tau is an antidote to that. Like, you decide and then you do it. In the beginning, that may be a gap of 1 second, and with more training, half a second. With more training, a quarter a second. For more training, maybe 1/10 of a second between intention and action, because you take out a lot of the emotional resistance or energetic blockages between your intention and action. So that's how I would explain my experience of Siu Nim Tau.